I see that a lot of people, by the way, men and women, carry all these limiting beliefs. And a lot of them say that I'm not worth it, I'm not going to succeed, it's not going to work. And no matter how ambitious we are or how much we've already done in the past, how much evidence we have, unconsciously we have these beliefs that are formed very early in our lives. And then they create our lives, really. Because logically we might think, but subconsciously we might still hold ourselves back.
Have you ever walked out of a meeting thinking they only listened when he repeated my idea? Or why did they ask me about my kids instead of my skills? You might think you just need to toughen up or work harder. But what if it's not about effort at all? What if your subconscious mind is quietly running the show?
Welcome to From a Woman to a Leader. My name is Limor Bergman, a former director of engineering, and I turn into executive coach for women in tech. And if you have ever felt stuck, overlooked, or like you're doing everything right but still not getting the recognition you deserve, this podcast is for you. Each episode brings real stories and practical strategies from women who have built bold, impactful careers on their own terms. If you want to grow your confidence, influence, and leadership without pretending to be someone you're not, hit subscribe and join me on Substack so you never miss an episode. Your next level starts here.
In today's episode, I'm joined by Egle, and she's a wealth and purpose strategist who blends deep work with the subconscious mind and years in corporate finance and business transformation. And today we talk about the subtle ways subconscious bias shows up when you're the only woman in the room, why you can be highly accomplished and still feel unworthy or scared to fail, and how to start rewriting those beliefs so you can ask for more money, more opportunities, and more support. So if you ever deemed yourself in order to be nice or felt guilty asking for what you need, stay with us. This conversation will help you see yourself as the leader you already are. So are you ready? Let's dive right in.
Hi, Egle, how are you?
I am very well, Limor. What about you?
Pretty good. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
I'm delighted. Thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, my pleasure. And today we're going to talk about the subconscious mind. I think it's a fascinating topic, and about unconscious bias. So why don't you tell our listeners how you even started knowing about it and noticing that in your career?
I was very passionate about change always, because at the early age, I moved out of my hometown at the age 14, and I was always looking for growth and for change. And so I found myself, after studying bachelor's and master's, and I was busy with my second master, I was working in finance, in corporate world with transformations. And what I noticed more and more with over a decade of corporate experience, that there weren't so many women around me in finance. And then I looked around and I didn't notice it at first because I was so focused on working hard, on being ambitious, on the growth, on the change, that it took me a while to actually start to see it. And then when I started to look around, I am always also interested in science and statistics, in understanding the world, why it is the way it is and how is it really. And then I looked into the statistics, and the more I look at it, the more I'm fascinated or surprised, not in the positive way, how much bias there is in the world. So if we look at the politics, if we look at the tech leadership or specialists, if we look at the governments or professions like finance, they're still mostly male, also statistically. And despite being a lot of diversity initiatives there are these days, little seem to change if we look at the statistics. So that's what started to fascinate me and foster my curiosity. How come that consciously we all understand that there are these differences and that there is a willingness to change and there is willingness to see something different in the world, and yet in the real world not so much changes. And this is how I then started looking into unconscious mind, because unconscious bias, it lives in the unconscious mind. It's something that we are not aware about.
Yeah.
And this is with any kind of change. So I saw this also in transformation programs. We can agree on something, but also in personal life, We can say, I'll go to the gym or I'll change this or that in my life. And yet, when the moment comes there, it seems harder than it is because only 5% to 10% what we daily think and feel is conscious. The rest is driven by our beliefs that we hold in our body. And this was a big aha moment for me when I realized we can talk and think with logic all we can, but if we truly want to change, we have to look much deeper than we can reason with our mind and with our logic.
That's fascinating. And, also for me, coming from tech, logic is usually, the way we think, right? We think logically, we think, oh, I do this, this will happen, And as you said, it doesn't always work. So how have you met, unconscious bias in your career? What were some of the symptoms you have noticed, other than obviously very few women?
The other symptoms that I saw was little things, like when you speak up in the meetings or when you have an idea and at first it doesn't land from your mouth, so to say, from what you have said, but when then others say it or repeat it, it suddenly comes over as a good idea. And at first, of course, I thought that it has something to do with me. So I worked on myself. I worked and worked and worked on myself until I started to see that this is something that actually many women experience. And the more I met women in tech, women in finance, there are the subtle ways that you are being dismissed as a human being or your thoughts, your thought leadership. The other way it was about interviewing for different functions, when the most part of your interview is first about how do you organize your life at home with your children and so on, before you actually come to the point where you can discuss what you're there to bring. So these little things, and I was working abroad as well. I lived in 5 countries in total. The most frustrating one was for me something that people are always very curious about. So I can't blame them. But they're always curious about where do you come from. And so I started explaining that at first with great openness and great curiosity also where they are coming from. But once I realized that in every conversation I'm having, I'm losing a lot of my time and my energy, while actually I would want to spend time talking about business, about results, about change, about growth. And while I'm very interested always the origins of any person, at some point it becomes a little bit like a broken record. And so I started noticing the topics of conversations that have nothing to do with your work or with your results or with your opportunities. And yet this is where you are first interviewed about before you can actually get to the topic you are there to discuss. So in these subtle ways, I noticed what unconscious bias truly is. And this could be also remarks about what you wear or about your age. And this is very interesting because the age is also one. At first, you're too young and then you're too old. So you really know it's not about the age. It's only a reason to pay attention to something different than what we're actually there to talk about.
So you're saying that people started asking questions related to your origin and to how you handle life, kids and all that, and not related to actually how you perform and what you can do.
Yes, definitely. Yes. And this is what I see many women actually deal with. The problem or the issue is that the way we live life, we live it in our own experience. So we never have felt how it is to be in other person's shoes. And oftentimes we don't even realize that other people are not being asked questions like that. So we tend to, and also because the way women are conditioned socially, there is much more beliefs that say you should be nice, you shouldn't be too ambitious or too arrogant, you shouldn't be too loud. These are all unconscious messages that a lot of women get from media, from parents, from everywhere, really, which also, even if we feel from within that something doesn't feel completely right, we are not always told or taught to actually speak out about it. And even if we do, there is the social punishment of being said, well, don't exaggerate it, for example, or don't make it bigger than it is, which makes a lot of people believe that it's indeed their problem. They think that it's something that they have misunderstood, and indeed they start to dim themselves down.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, everything you said, I face it, and I think the message for women out there, I mean, then it's not, first of all, it's not your fault, right? I mean, this is how society expects us to behave. And now I'll be happy to hear from you about your journey, what you learned, and how we can help our listeners today.
So, what I learned is that yes, there are all these systemic challenges, but let's not get discouraged by that. So, there is really more work for women to do when it comes to self realization, to financial well being and career, and so on. But that there are also ways to break this. And the way I found that we can break this is by working with our own subconscious mind and the beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And also starting to validate our own experiences, our own feelings, our own instincts, and start to trust ourselves more than what people around us might be telling us. And this is more difficult at first than it might sound. It sounds really easy to just trust yourself, but it's really a practice that by doing it, it gets easier and easier. And through this process of learning to listen really to the instincts of the body, to the subtle hints really about what's good for me, what's not good for me, and also diving even deeper. And when I work with subconscious mind, that's what I find really fascinating and groundbreaking. I see that a lot of people, by the way, men and women, carry all these limiting beliefs. And a lot of them say that I'm not worth it, I'm not going to succeed, it's not going to work. And no matter how ambitious we are or how much we've already done in the past, how much evidence we have, unconsciously we have these beliefs that are formed very early in our lives. And then they create our lives really. Because logically we might think, but subconsciously we might still hold ourselves back. And then the circle, it reinforces itself. So by working with these unconscious beliefs and building the trust, the confidence, even allowing ourselves to fail, that's also a big one, the perfectionism or ability to fail without punishing ourselves. It's everything that allows to learn and to grow further. And I speak about this like breaking the glass ceiling. This is what I experience really as a process of breaking the glass ceiling because it starts within, in our own heads and in our own bodies. And of course, the environment can either help it or make it more difficult. But by working with our own beliefs, we even are more capable to choose which environments are better for us and how do we want to shape our environments to support us better in this process.
Definitely. But first we need to work on ourselves, right? I mean, I think that no matter what environment you're at, even if it's the most supportive environment, if you feel like you're not good enough, if you keep judging yourself, if you're trying to be perfect, that will not help you, right? I mean, even the most supportive environment will not help you. And I would like to hear from you, Egle, like if you have any tips to share with our listeners of how do you identify your inner thoughts, inner beliefs, and then we can talk about how you go about debunking.
What's also very fascinating for me that even I am always still surprised about the unconscious belief that I carry. So some of them are really far beyond the surface. So when I work with subconscious mind, we also do muscle testing because muscles, they tense up when something seems to be stressful or false, and they relax when something seems to be true or safe. So this is really at the depths of how our bodies and our beliefs work. But there are signals on the surface, and there are ways to open this awareness that everyone can do at home. And so listening to the emotions is the first one, especially like I mentioned just before, the way we are conditioned not to feel emotions or to judge ourselves. This is one big change that opens a lot is by starting to listen to emotions. Anger or frustration or sadness or disappointment, they are all signals of something that is triggering us. And these are all breadcrumbs to then look within and ask, which story in my head is making me feel the way I feel? Because the first reaction is always to believe this is how we work, the projection of a mind. We think something outside is making us angry or something outside us making sad. But the outside is only triggering something, a belief that we already hold within. And once we look these few layers deeper, okay, what happened? How do I feel and think about it? And what's making me sad here or angry here or frustrated here? That already opens new insights and new wisdom. Then we can start questioning those beliefs. Is it really true? Is there another way to think about it? And how can I think differently about it? And journaling, writing things like that out really helps. And sleeping on the questions like that and just opening the mind on these questions and allowing them to marinate is really what already starts opening new insights, because also the mind, it starts to shut down everything that's not in line with our current beliefs. And at the moment that we start questioning them and say, how differently can I look at this? Is there another truth? Is there another evidence I can create? This is already the gentle way that everyone can do at home that can help.
Okay, so basically the emotions that comes up, kind of stay with them and ask yourself, like, why is it happening? Why am I feeling that way? What kind of thoughts comes to my mind? What do I believe in? And then writing it down, and then ask yourself, how else can I look at this? Yeah. And I can give an example, like, failure is something big. We are conditioned to avoid failure at all costs, I think, as human beings, not just as women. And I think it stems from the fact that at a very young age, the whole school system, everything kind of geared towards fail versus succeed. So we are constantly being examined, right? I mean, we do a lot of tests, and above a certain grade is passing, below a certain grade is failing, and failure is kind of conditioned in our head as something negative. And if you fail later on in your career, then you say, oh my God, what have I done? I made a mistake. I'm so bad. I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough. Maybe I should give up. Maybe I shouldn't do it. Maybe I'm not cut up for this job. What do you think?
I think everyone has these ideas like that. And it comes the way you mentioned very early in our age, in our lives. We are told this way, and it's passed on generation to generation. But there are some people like Thomas Edison. He said, I didn't fail 1,000 times. He said, I just found 1,000 ways that it doesn't work. So he knew to find how to look at failure as also a form of success. And it's also very interesting what you say now. It's in the corporate environments. I found that there is an environment where failure is indeed dangerous, emotionally dangerous. It is not safe to fail, and it's because of our own judgments, but it's also because of the way teams interact, the way hierarchies interact. If you look at the entrepreneurs, at people who lead companies or who build or create companies, they know that failure is something they have to do. They know that the faster they fail, the faster they succeed. So it has a lot to do indeed with the way we are trained to believe.
Yeah.
The failure is not good or bad by itself. It's what we make out of it and how we navigate after we failed. And what is failure anyway?
Yes. The challenge, I think, comes when you work in an environment that really judge you for failing, that is not welcoming failure, maybe even punish you for failure. And then how do you deal with it?
Yes, this is the topic and the biggest dilemma. So I am also a fan of work of Dr. Gabor Mate. He speaks a lot about mind and body connection and how individual influences the environment and how environment influences the individual. And he speaks about the healing in the toxic culture. And toxic sounds like a big word, but toxicity is something that happens in our bodies when we experience stress. And so a lot of cultures are toxic in a way. I know I'm using a big word, but it's just chemically, biochemically. When we say that in school, we punish kids for making mistakes, but it's also, the corporate, the politics, even the medical, if you make a medical mistake, there's also a lot of fear and punishment for making mistakes. So we have a lot of systems where this belief that we can navigate out anything and that failure is not definitive and that it's more about the intention and leadership about what you do in the failure. There is part individualistic and the part it's of the environment. And the question that I always keep asking myself, and I look at people around me, there is no right or wrong answer, but there's always a choice. How much can I take for my responsibility and what kind of influence I can have on others? And when is better to also look for the environment that's maybe more open or more supportive? And one cannot work with the other. So if the environment is very supportive, but the person is very self-critical without any intention to change, nothing will change.
Mm-hmm.
And the other way around, we can have a lot of impact on our environment. But if you're the only one and everyone else is closed off for any idea or openness, then it's also will be very hard to make impact there. However, human process, it's always interactive. So it's always a process of growth. It's step by step by step, checking what do I want? What's the intention? How can I influence my environment? And what kind of ambition do I have? And what kind of environment I want to be in my career, in my life, in my day to day?
Yeah, I think you raise a very good point. Eventually, you have to ask yourself if the environment, if you've done what you could to influence, to create a change, and what kind of environment do you need? And sometimes you're just not in an environment that is right for you, and you have to change it.
Yes. And this is the experiment, the social experiment, the human experiment. Because sometimes maybe you just need one relationship, and the relationship you can also influence by the way you are, by changing your own beliefs, by your own communication, by your own intentions and goals. You can really form and build relationships. And sometimes maybe one mentor or one trustworthy colleague can be a beginning for a change, but there has to be a personal connection, a relationship where there is an opening for a change.
Definitely. And I think nowadays it's very challenging to create those connections because people work remote or hybrid, makes it more difficult. And do you have any tips on how to make those personal connections?
For making personal connections, it begins with trust in yourself, because making a personal connection takes some openness and vulnerability. And especially now, if we talk about emotionally unsafe environments or environments where people are not yet aware about the impact of emotional well-being. And if you're open up and you're being judged, this is an emotional unsafe environment. It's a big chance that you yourself don't feel trusting to be vulnerable with someone. And yet, this is what will be needed to truly make the connection. And it takes a little bit of risk to be able to open. So there is this growing the trust in yourself that no matter what others say or how they judge you, you will be okay. There is nothing that can change in your worth despite what others think or feel about you. So that's the feeling from inside. And from that place, it's possible to connect with another human being through the same principle of accepting them the way they are. And then the relationship, it can be built in small moments, in human connection moments, anything that's about the kids or hobbies or even weekend activities. I was never really a fan of small talk because, if it's the same small talk every weekend, what did you do last weekend? You just check out. But it's about finding the topics, even if they are on the surface, that are really important for someone and are also important for you. And then it's asking questions and listening deeply, and then finding for those connection points, something where you're actually similar or where you are curious about to learn about each other, instead of looking for the ways how you differ or how connection is not possible. So even the story where someone comes from, to come back to what we just spoke about, could be a good starting point for building connection, if that's something that both are interested in talking about. And then this is the personal part, connecting as a human being. And then when there is trust, you can also connect on the more career topics, or actually help others or ask for favors yourself. This is also something we are not taught so much, but asking for what you need or what you want is also an extremely important skill, because the way women, especially women on this one, are conditioned is to suppress your needs. And yet to move up in your career or to make influence on your environment, you will have to first become conscious of your own needs, and then second, make those asks. Know that no is also not the end of the world, that you might get 5 or 10 no's, but by asking it for the 11th time or 100th time, there can be that you will have an opportunity or you will have a chance. So it's a growth process of building and nurturing the connections.
For sure. And I think that two things I want to kind of mention here. Yes, as women, we really are bad at asking for help. We love to help others. We don't know how to ask for help. We don't feel comfortable with it, and we have to, right? As you mentioned. And, and also thinking about how to handle rejections is very important. Like the 10 no's or whatever, how many no's you hear, that shouldn't break you. That should define who you are. If you tried something and it failed, you will not succeed if you haven't tried something first. Like, for example, I wanted to do public speaking this year. So I started submitting talks, right, to conferences. And most of them, most of the times you either don't hear back or they reject your talk. That happens, right? Because you don't always know what they're looking for. You're just guessing a lot of times. I write something that I think is important and is relevant for me, but maybe the organizers, that's not what they're looking for. But if I don't keep doing that, I will not get an opportunity to talk. So kind of facing rejections is a big one that I think also we need to practice.
This is this whole topic of what do we make rejection mean about ourselves?
Yeah.
And can we learn from every no? Can we see every no as a practice, as a lesson?
Sometimes. I mean, personally, in my story, not always I know, right? If I submitted a talk that wasn't accepted, I can ask myself whether maybe this talk is not so relevant as I thought. So maybe next time I can try something else, which happened to me. I tried just a different topic. Or, it just wasn't the right thing for the organizers. And then, well, maybe for this conference, I need to try something different next time. Or maybe this conference is not the right fit for me. But as you mentioned earlier, not taking it personally. Not kind of implying something bad about yourself. Oh, I'm not good. Oh, I cannot do it. I will never be able to do it. It's more about, well, maybe it's not a good fit, or maybe I need to think about something different.
Exactly. Yes. Beautiful example.
Yeah. Wow. Egle, it's wonderful speaking with you. Anything else you wish to leave with our listeners?
Knowing the audience that you're speaking with, Limor, I just want to tell them that if they don't know it yet, that they are already very special and very progressive. I hope that they already know that. But if not, I just want to give a reminder that, even our mothers and our grandmothers, they didn't even have a chance to do what they do. I know in the Netherlands, it's only less than 100 years ago that a woman could stay employed when she had a baby or open her own bank account. So it's really very fresh that women have rights like men. And it's not always easy to be in the environments that are not created for being a woman and being true to yourself. And then I want to encourage to realize that they are the leaders, no matter which function they are, which title they hold, that they already are the leaders. And to realize that and give themselves credit every day for what they're already doing.
Love that. Love what you said. By the way, quick book recommendation, The Leader Had No Title by Robin Sharma. It's a wonderful book and it speaks directly in what you mentioned, like to be a leader, you don't need a title. And everyone is a leader. And I like what you said, like you're all special, you're all unique. I really believe that every woman, every person brings something valuable and unique. You just have to realize that.
Yes.
Wonderful. So how can our listeners find you, Egle?
The best place to find me is LinkedIn by my name, Egle Aleknaviciute. And from there, you can find my other social media. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram, and my website, where more information is about what I do and the way I work with subconscious beliefs. And I especially like to focus on the money and financial well-being, so financial and emotional liberation.
Wonderful. This is such an important topic, right? Especially as women, we don't talk enough about financials and about money. So it's super, super critical. Thank you so much, Egle. It's been really a pleasure having you here today.
Thank you for this conversation, Limor. I really appreciate being here with you today.
Thank you so much for listening to the episode with Egle. I hope you enjoyed it. And before you go, I want to share what's coming up next week. And next week on From a Woman to a Leader, I'm sitting down with Marina Morgan. She is an organizational psychologist and founder of the Morgan Impact. And if you ever thought, my life looks fine, so why do I feel unhappy? This episode is for you. We talk about the hidden load women carry, how burnout can disguise itself as I hate my job, and why the first step is not quitting, pivoting, or making a massive decision. It's actually rebuilding your nervous system and your capacity. And Marina shares a simple daily practice that takes 10 minutes and can change how you feel inside your life. Make sure you're subscribed to From a Woman to a Leader either on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. So making sure you don't miss an episode. And if you know a woman in tech who is caring too much and calling it normal, send her this show. And thank you so much for listening. And I'll see you next week. Bye.